Thank you for coming to Scott's lecture. Scott MacQueen has restored our film Invaders from Mars, 1953, directed by William Cameron Menzies. Restoration begins with the rights holders to take care of their materials for future generations. Unfortunately, in the 50s, a lot of material, especially from B films, got lost, and many of the B films were not appreciated because they were low budget. But this film is different because William Cameron Menzies, as you may know, was quite a genius with set design, and he did a wonderful job with Invaders from Mars, which you will see, I hope, in the cinema. The restoration started for us in 2010 when Jan Willem Bosman Janssen, who is the director of Ignite Films, found an element at a stock footage facility, and he bought that element, but it was an original camera negative, but it was missing vital footage. And finally, in 2021, Scott MacQueen came in. We retrieved some prints from other archives, and
Thanks
the
to Janet.
restoration was done at Roundabout Films in Burbank, California. That's all for me. Please give a big welcome to Scott MacQueen.
Thank you. And thank Janet for her diligence in finding prints around the world to fill up our losses. Do many of you know William Cameron Menzies by name or reputation? One person, two. Menzies was, they created the title production designer for him. He'd begun in the 20s. He designed, drawing out all the storyboards and the set designs for Fairbanks, for Thief of Baghdad, for example. Went to Goldwyn and worked with Richard Day there. You can't say enough about him. A little picture called Gone with the Wind. He completely designed for Selznick, and Selznick swore by him. He came in and designed The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Sam Wood would not make a picture without him. Kings Row, Our Town, fabulous stuff. And he always wanted to direct. He directed 2 films at Fox in the early 30s, and they were co-direction because they didn't trust him with his dramatic sense of handling actors and all. Great at mise-en-scène and visuals, but not in telling a tale the way a great film director does. So he shared those. But then later, after the war, he did have a chance to design and direct a handful of other movies. The most well-known and one of the greatest is this B movie, Invaders from Mars. Invaders started in 1950 with its first screenplay. Before Rocket Ship XM, before War of the Worlds, it was done by a man named John Tucker Battle for All Art Pictures Company. I won't go into the details of them. They later made things like Frankenstein 1970 and The Monster That Challenged the World, very much B filmmakers. They let their rights lapse, and Eddie Alpertson Sr. picked them up, and he hired Menzies to put this film together. And it is like nothing else we've ever seen in cinema. It left a mark on American children like no film of its era. Everyone that's my age or a little older, I caught it on TV around 1962. Those who saw it in the theater in 1953 when they were like 7 to 8 years old had nightmares for years. John Sayles was one of them. John Landis, Steven Spielberg went to see it 5 times in Arizona when he was a boy. He said he didn't understand how films were made, and he went back each time hoping that the bad parents, the evil possessed parents, would be good this time, and they never were. Restoring the film was tough because it was filmed in color in the 3-color Cinecolor system. Technicolor had a lock on full color. Eastman Kodak in 1950 developed color negative, and this was filmed in 1953 at the height of the sci-fi boom and the height of the saucer sightings in America. 1952 is the year of all the saucers over Washington, D.C. There was a big flap about it. The film ties into Cold War paranoia and distrust of authority and the logic of a dream. This is, there we go. Is that working there? This is Jimmy Hunt, who plays the young 12-year-old boy who wakes in the night and sees the saucer landing in the hill behind his house. Living down in California, in the Burbank area, these remind me of the hillocks up at Foothill Boulevard. And there's even a line in the movie where they ask someone what his dad does, and he says, well, he's an engineer over at the Armstead plant. Well, that's where Lockheed had their plant, which later became Skuntworks, but they started up at the top of Hollywood Way, right below foothills like this. So I think that played into it. Whoops, wrong way. There we go, I got it now. So here's the taking process, Kodak color negative. The Y, C, and M that you see, these are the separation marks for when they make black and white reductions off the color negative through filters, because the Cinecolor, like Technicolor, was a black and white emulsion printing process, but with huge differences. Where Technicolor made a matrix, soft gelatin that they could imbibe with a color dye and then transfer to a blank film, Cinecolor used metallic dye mordants. They made separation positives from the Eastman negative, and then from those they made black and white dupe negatives from the RGBs, called the RGBs. They were colorblind black and white positive emulsions, and they would be impregnated with a water-soluble yellow dye and then step printed through the cyan and magenta printing negatives simultaneously on opposite sides of duplicitized DuPont film stock, along with the soundtrack. The soundtrack, as you'll see in examples, was cyan blue in color. So having done that now, the DuPont duplicitized print stock that had captured the latent black and white image were developed into silver. The cyan was laid face down on a bath solution that converted the soundtrack and the latent image to a cyan-toned pigment. Then the other side was floated on another bath that converted the latent silver to a magenta pigment. You now had two colors. No surprise, Cinecolor came out of a two-color printing process that used the same basic principle. But we have to get a third color in here, and we only have a front and back. So what they did was the DuPont duplicitized stock was developed into silver, and the Verso floated. All right, so you've got that latent silver that's latent yellow dye, which prints through the blue negative that's already in the raw film. So that gives you your third color. Now, why did the film become lost? First is the Cinecolor process. The titles and all the optical effects, dissolves, fade outs, they weren't in the negative the way they were in Eastman negatives. They would make dupes and cut them in. Everything was assembled in the Cinecolor black and white printing negatives, which no longer exists. Within a year of the first release in America, the facilities had to be recut to accommodate 10 minutes of new scenes that were created for Europe. The European exhibitor wanted a longer movie, and they did not like the ending, which is a dream ending. I don't want to spoil it for tonight, but it's not a complete in and out dream. If you come tonight, you'll see what I mean. So this version had a linear ending where they take the boy home and the army has blown up the flying saucer and he goes to bed, and the end. The female doctor, the woman doctor says, the little man has had a busy day, and that's how it ended in Europe. The Eastman color negative became redundant at that point, with Cinecolor and then producer Edward Alperson going bankrupt the following year, in 1956. All the prime elements were scattered. This included the incomplete, unfilled camera negative, the Cinecolor printing negatives, the master positives, the soundtrack negatives. There was a reissue in 1955 in the US we know very little about. They likely recycled exchange prints, took the 53 prints and sent them back out again. In 1957, a dupe negative Eastman color print was made to serve Rome, and that's our Gli Invasori Spaziali in Eastman color. So they took a Cinecolor print and copied it and cut in those scenes that we saw before of them with the flying saucers and the new ending. Oops. And then in 1962, 16mm black and white prints came to American television, and then about 1970, one of those clean 35 Cinecolor prints made a 16mm Eastman reduction negative for non-theatrical, and TV was now in color, so they needed that in color to make the sales. In 1976, Richard Rosenfeld, who owned the title at that point, granted a license for the U.S. for a theatrical reissue only in America. The licensee used Rosenfeld's master 35 Cinecolor print as his production master positive, and he cut into it scenes for the foreign versions, making it a spurious combination of both variants. So here's what did survive, what we know about. And I thank Janet Schorer for checking all of the archives throughout the world to see who held materials on it. I'm aware of 2 prints in private collections that are off limits. The collectors, the owners just would not make themselves available. We knew better than to even ask. The original camera negative Jan Willem found with Producer's Lab in Los Angeles. Somehow the camera negative got sold to a stock library, and there it sat for all these years. But even that was missing. Reel 2, Reel 1B was missing. So that entire 8-minute reel had to come off of a Cinecolor print. We had 2 of the foreign Cinecolor prints from overseas. One came from Australia. One was in this country at Eastman House, but it was the foreign version. And then Ignite had a faded Eastman color print of that spurious 1976 reissue that was in their collection at UCLA. Very badly faded. Now, the ranking of the sources. Our top source to begin with was a scan of the original camera negative, which we were able to do. That was Roundabout, right, Vincent? Vincent Perazzi from Roundabout in Burbank, California. They scanned the original camera negative for us as it existed. It had been purchased not in 2014, but in 2012 by Jan Willem and Ignite Films. It's an Eastman Kodak 5248 stock, and as I said, only 8 of 9 reels conform for Cinecolor printing. Number 2 was a Cinecolor print from the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. It again was the foreign version on DuPont stock, 4 times 2,000 foot loads, that's 8,000 feet roughly, and it carried an RKO distributor logo in the leaders. So they were one of the foreign distributors. I believe in the UK it was Rank that distributed it, and RKO had it in Belgium, and RKO had this as well. The quality of the color and the quality control of the printing were substandard. Most of the European observatory sequence, for some reason, was cut out and missing. So we only had the first couple of shots and then it was gone. Now, that didn't matter to us because the authentic version doesn't include that, but for Blu-ray release, we very much wanted to have the foreign scenes available for value-added material, so we had to find a complete source for that. It was also well-worn, scratched, it had field splices, which I'll show you examples of, color dirt including hairs and silver highlight clusters that were induced during the Cinecolor printing process. Now there's a field splice on the right, the police chief, there's the splice with the cement, and that may have even been a pre-developed splice, but I don't think so. This looks like it's cement residue and bubbling. Behind us here is a condition where there was blue halation in the shadows. You'll see a lot of that in these foreign prints and even in one of the domestic prints. I suspect it was a quality control issue that Cinecolor had never quite finished. The third source was the 35 Cinecolor print of the European version that George Eastman Museum holds. Again, DuPont stock for 2,000 feet of film. Again, it's an RKO sister print to the National Film and Sound Archive. So even though it was an Eastman house at Rochester, New York, it's a foreign print. Erratic grading, eccentric damage, printing defects. The scanning was done for us. We had no control on the scanning. What we were shown looked very good, and we ordered it, and when the scans came in, they were rife with movement and unstable and full of shrinkage and damaged perforations. We could have used it. It would have meant re-registering almost the entire film for the shots that we needed, which is time-consuming and expensive. So we used it sparingly only for shots we could not obtain from the Australian print or elsewhere. Only when the shots were not present in the camera negative or the National Film and Sound Archive. Next source was a Cinecolor print of the European version. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the Eastman House print. There's your cyan soundtrack induced by the Cinecolor printing of the separation negative. And there's an example here in the police station of erratic timing. These walls, which are essentially supposed to be white, are coming up violet. The floor's got a violet look to it. And this is one of the better examples of the Cinecolors that we found. You'll see a few more later that are very color damaged. Now, here's the Cinecolor print, domestic version, a collector print. We could not find an original print of the original ending, the American ending. And Janet made another very hands on knees and crawling to the throne request at Eastman House. Do you have anything else? And they said, well, we do happen to have a private collector's print, but we need his permission. So it turns out the private collector, who will remain nameless, is a huge fan of the film and made his print available to us. Again, it was scanned for us in Rochester. But here's a great example of that blue artifact in the shadows. It's really ghastly. I'd never had seen anything quite like this in color. It's like it's solarized. On the right here, again, blue track shows you it's a Cinecolor print. Here is a defect of the emulsion, minus color, it's minus magenta. And again, all these scrapes, minus magenta scrapes here, which likely are not in the negative, but likely are flaws in the DuPont emulsion. Here's a nice tear in the print. And here is the ending. Here's one of those lovely embedded pre-developed tears in the DuPont emulsion, which is giving us these nice minus green and minus magenta curly hair marks. Here again, the domestic version, the collector print from Eastman House, had, again, the same problem with the blue shadows in his nightstand. The color overall is just dreadful. It is a night-for-night scene. He's turned the light out, but here the alarm clock about to go off, and here again this huge emulsion defect. It has a droplet pattern as though it's a coating error perhaps, or it could be even a processing, chemical error in the processing. And here we have not yet found a main title that we could use. This, I think, has gotten put out of order. And in any event, here is a main title from the faded 1976 print, and this is the one shot that existed in no other copy. And it's a shot those of us that know the film have known and laughed at all of our lives. The boy's parents have been zombified. The Martians have put a probe in their brains to make them, fifth columnists and to take orders. And Milburn Stone, who played Doc on Gunsmoke for any Americans here, Sergeant Roth shows up with this gauze and he shows them the probe in his hand, and he explains what it does, how it's in the base of the brain, and that when this exploded, that's what killed little Kathy Wilson. It went off in her brain. And David's, oh no, I got mom and dad too. So Milburn Stone says, I think we know how to duplicate this and we can do whatever. And so he goes off and turns to the boy who says, hurry please. And Milburn Stone looks at him, pats him on the head. And every version cut that, except for these materials from the 76 version. We'd grown up with it on the black and white TV prints. So, having mapped out all of our sources, the next thing is your standard EDL. There are 667 events in Invaders, and an event would include a dissolve. So, straight cuts, and then if you cut to a shot, which then dissolves to another shot, that's an event, because all the events are marked by hard cuts. And they're laid out here across the field: original negative, Australian print, Australian comments, Eastman print, domestic foreign, Eastman collector, and then I think that's the UCLA at the end. I can't see that from where I am. Eastman collector print. And so here there's weave, it could possibly be used. Time codes tell us where we're going in and out of the shots, shot descriptions. And these tell us the nomenclature of the files as they were received. And I don't know, should I tell the story about the collector print from Rochester? Yeah, when the files came in, they were marked Scorsese print. So it turns out Marty, too, is a huge fan of this. And he's aware that he granted access, and anyway. So that whole generation, everybody was influenced by this film, and not by the Tobe Hooper remake. One of the problems we had with doing our EDL is the fact that there's much optical work in it. Even before the foreign scenes were shot, the picture comes out to 78 minutes, and apparently it didn't run that in the final work print. So they began flopping shots over, left to right, right to left. I think there's a chain of 4 mutants, which ends in this fat pot-bellied guy. I think we see them 4 times, running back and forth, one way, the other way. Other shots are enlarged. I think we have an example there. Yeah, so here's the original negative of the Martians with the ray gun, and there's the flopped and blown up by about 30% version in the finished film. So what we would do with a thing like that was go back to the original negative and replicate their optical change if we had original negative on it. Vincent, do you want to tell them about the lamp, the spotlight? How long did we spend chasing that down?
Yeah, same scenario.
And we couldn't find it. Where's the spotlight? It goes right to left. And I think it was you, or was it Vahe, finally said, oh, that's from there, and they've blown it up just so much. And so, needle in a haystack, right. Here's the famous shot of Hilary Brooke as the mother. How many people have seen this movie and remember that shot? That's the one that just gives you a frisson. I've been in audiences where you get to hear a murmur, ooh, when that comes on, because she's the loving mother who we've seen in a powder blue bathrobe with long, pretty blonde hair, and now she comes up like a Teutonic, well, what do you want to call her? A Fraulein with her hair in a big Germanic coil, dressed in black, and totally emotionless. And he runs to her looking for help. He's at the police station. And as she reaches down, her eyebrow just goes twitch. And you know, oh, something's wrong. You never forget that. And again, there we have a Cinecolor print on the left. And again, you've got some false coloration. You've got the blue. Some of these are almost purple in some copy. There we go. There's the purplish one. And this is more of a cool white. Her skin is very jaundiced, plus yellow. Here we've got very normal skin. And same for the back of Jimmy's neck, I believe. Oh, and there's also, look at that little hair that's burned into Jimmy's shirt collar. I hadn't even seen that before. So much to find here. So there's the police station again. Bright purple. And Helena Carter, in her ivory white dress now, is going pinkish magenta. His shirt is pink, where it's actually a light tan color. The walls are cold pale blue in the camera negative. Now we're going to see some running footage. Here's the main title. Did I do that right? There it is. So this is from one of the Cinecolor prints, before and after processing. Look at the bounce, look at the cinch marks, splices, and the bad color. This is the way the title's supposed to look. This very title was created from the very before clip we just saw. Thank you, Vincent, and your guys there. It's quite a job. Now here's the police station. Whoops. There we go. Whoops. There's Hillary on the phone. Again, this is the wonderful scene of Mother. See how the walls are actually supposed to be going toward white? Let's see that again. Do we toggle up to see it again? And you'll get to see the twitch. Whoops. Forget how long that card was. I wish we had sound on a couple of these, but we don't. There it is. So she's calling their friend the astronomer, who tells her David's got his marbles intact, and twitch. Here we are inside the saucer. This is final graded from the camera negative. And if you look at a number of the Cinecolors, you get things coming up bright green and all this. It's a very complex lighting setup. It was photographed by John Seitz, who once upon a time photographed Valentino doing the tango in Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and who photographed Sunset Boulevard, among many other things. So this was, and Seitz said that he lit the thing just like he would have lit a Technicolor film in terms of his ratios and cross lights. And here they see the Martian intelligence. That's the image no one forgets. That and the singing of the choir. There's the most amazing choral music that goes along with it. Here's the mind probe being inserted at the intelligence's command. The mutants take, did I do that right? There we go. So the mutant, there's Jimmy banging on the bubble. The Martian watches him, and they take him away. The Martian was played by a little Mexican dwarf, a midget, little person. And Jimmy Hunt told me that when they got to the set, his mother said, "Luz." They'd gone to high school together, only in Hollywood. Now, here is one of the foreign scenes. On the right, you will see, am I clicking this wrong? I clicked it wrong, excuse me. On the right, you see no, it's still, it should be, oh, that is a still, okay. On the right, you see the faded 1976 dupe print of the European-only 10-minute observatory scene. This is where Arthur Francis, the astronomer, shows Jimmy models of flying saucers and scrapbooks and all kinds of typical Eisenhower-era paraphernalia. Oh, there it is. And you can see how far we've come from purple to, the photographs are black and white. His suit now matches what it should. Now, one of the problems, of course, they shot this a year later, and Jimmy Hunt he's grown a year. They've given him a brand new buzz cut and a sweater vest, which he does not wear in the other footage. And they've done a very hasty job on Helena's makeup. She kind of looks a little trashy compared to how gorgeous she looks in the original footage. And he uses ashtrays to simulate flying saucers. Thank you, Arthur. You can put the ashtrays down now. So this is not the final. It's a bump light, which is the first time through with rudimentary color. Again, we only did these at 2K because they're just for value added. They're not going back into the movie proper. Now, here is, David sees the saucer twice. The movie opens with him seeing the saucer land. After all this falderall, unlike the European version where they hide behind a tank and the saucer blows up and they go back to bed, he wakes from a nightmare and runs into his parents' room. And this doesn't have sound? No.
Horrible. I thought they did something awful to you. They were green, they had a ray gun, and the fence was gone.
What fence?
Across the sand pit.
Well, let's go out and have a look at it.
It's back now.
Well, if it's back and we're the same, then you would...
Again, yellow
son.
flesh,
I
blue
guess so,
shadows,
only-
defects. There's an optical there, and look what's happening to the dresser. And the scratchiness of the wear and the sound. Oh, I'm spoiling tonight. So what happens in the movie is he goes back to bed, and for the second time, the saucer now really appears. Or seems to, it appears a second time.
Gee whiz.
Now, here's the same scene. See, Cinecolor as found, and so this should be the restored. Yeah. Oops, I did it again. They even marked my buttons, and I'm still not doing them correctly.
Mom! Dad! Are you all right?
Of course we're all right.
What's the matter, son? That lightning scare you?
No, it wasn't that. Didn't you go to the hospital?
Why, no, we've been sleeping. There's nothing to be afraid of. Oh, now, what's wrong?
It was horrible. I thought they did something awful to you. They were green, they had a ray gun, and the fence was gone.
What fence?
Across the sand pit.
Well, let's go out and have a look at it.
It's back now.
Well, if it's back and we're the same, then you were dreaming, son.
I guess so, only...
You go to sleep now.
Sound has been worked on as well. Thank you to Mr. Faust.
Gee whiz.
Now you'll notice this is distributed by 20th Century Fox, who handled it in the United States. The other point we had to make for the value-added foreign is the fact there's no distributor credited, just the crescent with Alperson's logo. And there are two changes in the movie itself, in its own original narrative. If you've not seen it before, you can't get the one. You probably didn't see the other one because you weren't here to observe the movie. But when the saucer first lands, there's a drone, an electronic drone that accompanies it out of the sky. This time the sound is it's a B-52. So there's a difference there. And it's not accidental, it's on purpose. The same thing that happens here in the original one, he just runs to his parents' room and says, "Mom, Dad." This time, the rainstorm breaks and the window's pelted with rain. So the dream has two variants. Does that mean it's real this time? I mean, it leaves that door open. So this is self-explanatory. I first saw Invaders at the age of 7, and like many baby boomers, I never quite recovered from it. I went to NYU Film School, and I joined Walt Disney in 1991 as Director of Restoration. I then went to work for Protec, a division of Eastman Kodak, handling restoration projects, which included something like 2 million feet of Olympic outtakes. I joined UCLA as head of preservation in 2012. And I'm very pleased that I was able to lead the archive kicking and screaming into the digital future. The first project they had done was Red Shoes, and that was an anomaly. They really were not going down this road till I got there, and I really dragged them. And I'm happy about that because you can do things digitally that you cannot do in film. I wish we could output these files to film for long-term 100-year keeping. But at the same time, when we showed this at Roundabout, Vincent's shop in Burbank, we had Jimmy Hunt, who's now 83 years old, there with his family. And Jimmy said, "I've seen it 3 times in my life on a big screen. When it was brand new, they dragged me to the Vagabond in the 1980s, and then this, and it's never looked this good." And that was high praise. That really made me feel happy. So, and look, he lives in my house, by the way. No, seriously. I found him on eBay for $500, and it turned out he had been built by a prop maker who was the brother of the most rabid Invaders from Mars fan in creation. In fact, just before my plane, he also had the ray gun, the big long ray gun. And the day before the plane, Jimmy's son came up. He happened to be in Berkeley visiting his son at college, and he called me at like 7 in the morning. He's like, "What are you doing today? Can I drive over? How far are you? Because did you really mean it that Dad could have the ray gun?" And I said, "Sure, the ray gun belongs to Jimmy." And so Jimmy now has the ray gun. Do we have any questions? Oh, come on, not one hand. Can you slip your mask a little, just so I can hear you? Oh, she has a microphone coming to you.
Thank you. Congratulations, I already saw the film, The Restoration, and it's really interesting. I was interested about the blue.
You saw it where, in TCM?
No, I mean in the festival they show.
Oh,
it
that's
to-
right. They've already run it one time, yes.
Yeah, I already saw it's really, really brilliant work. And I'm interested about the blue artifact that you said. I mean, because I also have the same problem in Thai Film Archive. We also have the blue artifact problem.
blue?
Yeah, how you fix it, and
It's
you know
proprietary
where it come from.
technique to roundabout. So you know where to send your film. No.
No.
No, it's a matter, just use basic deduction. You're going to have to split out color channels and then manipulate them
Okay.
by whatever. Yes, sir.
But you know why it happened? Do you know that?
I do not know. I'm suspecting it's either fog on the original emulsion when the film was made. It's not in the printing negatives, the black and white separation negatives, because they would have shown in the first American prints. I've seen one or two good prints of it, and that effect is not there. I was surprised to find it here. Bear in mind that Super Cinecolor was a heartbeat away from death, and they had these contracts to get these titles out, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Technicolor itself always had, every laboratory has quality control problems. Technicolor would have problems with their printing matrices and bad transfer and all. And in England, Technicolor UK called them North of Watford prints, meaning send them to the north of England where no one in London or the major cities will see them. And I suspect the same thing. I've seen prints like that have like negative stock splices in them. And having worked with Technicolor on projects when I was at Disney, I could see how this kind of thing goes. So I suspect with the heartbeat almost stopped at Cinecolor, they had these bad prints and they said, send them overseas. Don't remake them.
I think you already mentioned this, so I apologize for asking for a clarification, but when this is eventually released, re-released or streaming or on home video, will it be with the European ending, or will that be kind of...
No, the movie will be the original movie as we know and love it, but on the Blu-ray, the value-added section will contain the 10-minute observatory sequence and the European ending as bonuses for those that want to see them. I mean, they're not very good. You don't want them in the movie, and you don't want that version. But as film aficionados, we all love things we hear about, and you hear about lost scenes, or they did this for that. I mean, I'm still waiting to see The Twelfth Night, the sound version of Nosferatu. Since I read about that 50 years ago in Lottie Eisner. And I don't know that it even exists, but these things should survive in their different forms. I even believe in some of the bastard versions being retained and preserved because they do represent the film at a moment in time. I've never seen it. I don't know that it's available even. We spent so many years trying to get back to an original, authentic 1930 version of All Quiet on the Western Front. And I'd see a print that had like the trench sequence with the rats, and this would have this. The prints we had, I grew up with in America, all were the 1951 reissue, and there were substantial changes. Well, now that everything is there, I'd love to see the late 30s issue. There's an anti-German version of it made on the eve of Hitler. So how do you turn All Quiet, one of the great pacifist works, into a anti-German Marshall movie? I don't know if it even exists, but yeah. More questions, please. This is your chance to eat me alive. Tear me to pieces. Oh, something made someone's brain turn. Come. You keep nodding, so you must have a question. You do see zippers on the back of the mutants. And that always makes an argument now. Were they meant to be zippered jumpsuits that the crew wore, or is that meant to be their skin? And, you can argue that all you want. When we saw it as kids, we figured that's what they're supposed to look like. Later, when you see the zippers, you think, I don't know. Say again, sir.
There's absolutely no question of
1954? I don't think so.
No, not in the original film, but in the.
Oh,
rest of
no.
it.
We would never.
No,
we would
absolutely
never do a thing like that. At least I would never do a thing like that. Even though I was just reading how Paramount just recreated the main titles for Blue Hawaii and stripped out a text list and did their new overlays. I mean, I've done that occasionally when you need to be authentic on something. All the Money Can Buy, which shows tonight at 6:15, we had to recreate the original release title, which didn't exist anywhere on film, but we had an excellent reference for how it was done. Anything else? Yes, sir.
In terms of the sound, was there variation? Well, was there differences between the different materials that you had?
Well, certainly there was different quality of materials, no content difference. The European materials, I never went to the European that thoroughly to see if they'd swapped any cues around or moved them, because we weren't looking to worry about that. I can't recall, Vincent, that we had even crossed our mind, because we were going for the original. As you can see, it came off of optical. It would likely have been recorded magnetic by 1953, but those things were probably long gone when Alperson liquidated.
And does this cyan audio chart present any particularities in terms of quality?
Does which?
Does the cyan audio?
They tend to be noisy. They tend to be noisier than a black and white silver track. They exist only for ease of production. The fact that you can do them at the same time you're doing one of the picture layers. That's why they chose cyan. And that goes back to the two-color Cinecolor process, which came out of multicolor in the 30s. Fox developed multicolor, which was a two-color process, and then that evolved into Cinecolor in the late 30s, which was a blue, Prussian blue and orange set of dyes and filters. And then that's what, in turn, led them down this road. Because they had to avoid the Technicolor patents. They had to avoid the Eastman color patents. Anyone else, please? This is your chance. Going, gone. Thank you all for coming.